want to welcome everybody to the El Cerrito Art Association, and we've got Julie Cohn with us here tonight. Julie is a watercolor artist, and she will be doing a painting and a portrait in watercolor using various colors and showing us how she approaches her work, including the background of the work. Julie's studied at UC Berkeley, and she's also a graduate of the California College of Arts. She works in her studio in Berkeley and teaches as well. And she's also been featured in a number of solo and group shows over the past many years. So we really want to welcome Julie to our meeting tonight, and we look forward to her showing us more about portraiture. This is the first time in a while that we've had somebody doing this. So thank you so much, Julie.
Okay, thank you so much for having me tonight. I always love coming to the El Cerrito Art Association to give demos. All of you are so welcoming and you have such great questions and ideas. And so I always have a good time. And I'm so glad that you've taken the time to come to Zoom, which is a very different way of approaching the demos. I am going to start tonight by talking with you a little bit about Usha. I will share the screen. And I really like this one here. She looks like she's inquisitive. It's a complex emotion here. And I really enjoy doing portraits of people when the emotion isn't so um, clear. You know, it's like there's a little more to take into that emotion than just one kind of mood. So I'm just leaving this up for now for a second, and I will be taking it off the screen because otherwise you won't be able to see me painting. So if you happen to have the photos that were sent to you, you can refer to the photo of Usha while I'm painting. So I'm going to paint a very enlarged painting for you, enlarged features, a portrait that really shows the features large so that you can see how I develop them with watercolor. I am using a traditional approach to watercolor tonight, and there are 5 steps that I have given that traditional approach. The first is wetting the entire paper and putting paint everywhere, and then lifting out where I want highlights on the face and in the background. The second is to put the shadow tones in after I've dried the paper. The third is the individual features. The fourth is the hair. And the fifth is going back over anything that I need to shift again. And in terms of my watercolor method that I'll be using, I use the terms puddle and dot mixtures when I teach. And I will be explaining a little bit about that as I go. But in general, puddle mixture is very runny, like water coming out of a faucet, and very, thin color. And dot mixtures are mixtures that when you move your brush back and forth and push down, you get a little area that's a darker dot. And the dot mixtures can be thin, thicker, and thickest. So I'll be mostly working with those kinds of consistencies tonight. And I will be using a variety of brushes, but mostly these 2 type of brushes, a size 12 or 14. I'm trying to see my brush in the camera. There it is. 12 or 14. This big one here in a size 8. Actually, this might even be a 6. And I am using a 12 by 12 square format. Just to share with you that if I were to get much bigger than that, it would be hard to work with on Zoom. But also, if I'm using just this, this size brush, which is not real large, it would take a really long time for me to fill the paper up. I do have a flat brush here that could be used when necessary, but I'm not sure that I will. I just want it handy. It's about a quarter to a half, more like a quarter inch, and or a little bit more than that. And this is a bright brush. It's a bright type flat, Brite. And this I'm going to use if I ever need to lift out anything. It's an oil brush and it's quite stiff. And I also have my paper towels and I have my sponge. And I think what I'll start with just is sharing with you a little bit about my drawing, and I will turn my camera around so you can see what I'm up to. This will take just a minute here. I need to secure them with tape, so just takes a sec to get all that down. And Claudia, just please let me know if, whoops, that was not supposed to go down quite so far. There we go. I'll try to get this as,
Yeah, that's pretty good.
yeah, I think I'm going to just make sure that you can see
Mhm.
my palette, most of it. It takes just a little, I like the Yiddish word finagling, getting this to look good enough. So you can see that pretty well, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then the full portrait, want to make sure you can see.
Yeah, that's good. That's good there.
Okay, good. You can see pretty much the mixing. I mean, if you can't see everything super well, you'll see it well enough at least to know approximately what color I'm using. I do have to put this portrait on a little bit of a slant, and otherwise it's difficult for me to see it well. So I apologize that you won't see it with the perfect angle, but I do my best to be able to see it myself, and you'll see all of the technique well, I think. So I just want to start out by sharing with you how I drew this on here. This is a square format. I had a photograph of Usha, and on that photograph, well, basically, I made the photograph into a square, and I made a grid on the square. Let's say, I don't know how many squares, but let's say it was 9. I would make 9 squares, all the exact same size on the square format of the 140 cold press Arches watercolor paper. And I use the bumpy side of the paper of the cold press because I really like the way that works. Um, I think for those of you who may have not done a lot of portraiture, using a grid is really great, especially, if you can make a square that's smaller with a photograph or the copy of the photograph and a square on your paper, then all you have to do is work with the grid and get the general idea of where everything is and then fill in the rest. And then after that, what I did is I made a study that is showing how I want to work with the values. I'm making choices here, not going to copy the photograph just as I see it in terms of the values, the light and the dark, but really making some choices like getting a little darker on parts of the eyes here, maybe part of the lip, deciding not to put all of the hair dark. So I'm making these decisions. I'm the designer, and I really like having that option, and not feeling I have to work from the photograph exactly. And the other reason I do that is because I really want to get the feeling that I have for Usha in this portrait, not just what the photograph says, but what I feel about Usha. So I'm going to make sure that this camera is super secure so that when I'm mixing, it's not shaking, because that can be annoying. So please let me know if you can still see everything or if you need me to put the camera down or up.
We can see it.
Okay, it's all good?
Uh-huh.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, one thing too about drawing that I just want to share is I look for asymmetrical qualities in the face. I don't look for what I know that the eyes are overall symmetrical and they should match up some when I put a line across, just so they look like they work together. But you can see that this eye is smaller and this eye is larger. This nostril in the photo looked larger, this is smaller. The lips have, on one side might be wider, the other less wide. So I just think it's really good to look for these basic, these asymmetrical qualities, and also be very careful to measure. So I'll measure, let's say, on the photograph itself. Um, how much is it from the eye to the nose? And then on the photograph again, oh, that goes about halfway up the chin. So then I'll look at the chin on the actual painting and I'll say, oh, well, if the chin is this size, then this space should be about halfway. So I make my two measurements on the photo, then my two measurements on the drawing. And I check back and forth to see, okay, is everything lining up? And it takes me quite a while to get a really as precise as possible drawing. The darker the drawing, the better for watercolor. I mean, you don't want to make it so dark that you can't ever erase anything. But I would say that making things fairly dark is good, because that very first wash I put on is going to have lots of different color in it. And I want to be able to always see that drawing underneath. And later on, I'm going to be filling everything out anyway. So the pencil will only add in the sense that it's, the edge of the nose will look a little stronger just because the pencil is there, but you won't notice it as pencil at all. So I'm going to start with step one of a portrait. And the very first thing that I'm going to do, I forgot to show you this particular brush. I'm going to start with a Hake brush. And a Hake brush is great for lightly going over the paper. And if I had any color on the paper at all, it would not make the color move at all, especially if the paper had been dried after I had painted. So I'm wetting this to what I call glossy. That means an extra little bead of water will be on the bottom here. Okay. So I know it looks like a lot of water, and it is a lot of water. And now I'm going to take off a little bit of this bead, and you see how I'm tapping on my sponge, and I'll get just a little bit of water off of the sides here. Just let me know at any time if you cannot see any of this, okay, Claudia?
Yes, I will.
Because I am moving it, here and there. So I'm going to, this is fairly glossy. I've taken a little bit of the bead off the bottom. And now I'm going to take the color. I've already started a mix, and I'm going to explain a little bit about them. I've got a combination of Scarlet Lake, which is this nice warm red, and a little bit of Permanent Rose. And I've put them in here, a puddle mixture, extremely runny. Okay. And then this next one here is Quinacridone Gold, which looks like brown, but it's actually a gold. And it's really nice and runny, which I also call a puddle mixture. And I also made a puddle mixture of cerulean blue. In this case, I used Sky Blue, which is American Journey brand from Cheap Joe's Art Stuff, North Carolina. But this is also a very thin mixture. And I'm going to do this very first coat with these three colors, because when they blend, they're really beautiful. I'm not going to be thinking about exactly where they're going. Everything's going to go everywhere. So let's start with some pink right into the background. I can lift any of this. So there's no concern about going over something the wrong way. It's going to bring some gold. And I'm not using a lemon yellow. I'm using quinacridone gold because Usha's skin is a rich browner tone, and I want to get some of that nice warm tone, deeper tone in there. And I'm going to go back and get a little bit more. So this is quinacridone gold. Tapping on the sponge before I get my color, Scarlet Lake. All right, and just drop some more in. The majority of the facial colors are the pink and the gold, but I will put some blue in as well. And I'm not having any concern about whether the shadow shapes are the blue, but I might be thinking just a little bit about shadow shapes, but I'm not going to get too concerned about getting specific shadow shapes. If I do put the blue more in the gold, I will get green. If I put a little more in the red, then I will get more lavender like. And I can also get a little grayer if I go back with a little bit more of another color into it, or browner.
Julie, there's a bit of glare on your sheet, so it's a little hard to see it. I don't know if the
Is that better? Nope.
camera or the thing can be tilted a little.
Sure.
I don't know.
Does that help?
Um, the overhead light is kind of creating a little bit of a glare, but it's okay.
Oh, is that okay?
That's better. Uh-huh.
It's much darker though. Is that all right?
Yeah, we can see
Oh,
it.
okay. So I'm evening out a little bit of the pinks, the golds, and often what I do here is I move it around also, but it's a little hard to do that in Zoom. I'll still do it, but you can see you're not going to see everything right away because of the angle. How about a little more bluish tone in some of these areas here? Just wanted to make sure I'm looking at my little study because I do want to see where I want my lights and my darks. So I'm setting that up here. Okay. The one thing I say is don't panic with watercolor. It's not worth it. The other night I dropped onions all over the floor. I was cooking some onions and I knocked the pan over and all the onions went to the floor and I didn't say anything. I just said, okay, I'll clean the floor. Maybe I'll wash off the onions. I'm just saying, panicking is not a good thing. And with watercolor, it could be easy to get all freaked out if you think something's going the wrong place. But you really have more time than you think to work with it. Okay, so you can see when I take this bead off on the bottom, and it's semi-glossy because there's no more bead. But now what I want to do is I want to come in and take out the lights. I would not do it if this was glossy. Semi-glossy is much better. You don't want all that extra water everywhere. So in fact, I'm going to just move this way so you can still see it, or even this way, and just let some of the water run off a little bit more, making sure that I don't have a lot of excess water on the surface. And now I'm going to clean my brush well, and I'm going to lift where I want my lights. Now, it will not go completely bright, bright white for a long time. It'll come back, but I can get the majority off. So I've got to make sure I have enough paper towels so I can really, you know, get this as dry as I need. I'm also thinking about the lights throughout this entire painting. How do I move from one area to the next and leave the lights? Like it's almost a dance of the lights. This particular eye has a lot of bright white in it, whereas the other one less so. And I do want to emphasize that. In fact, I can make this quite bright and then later come in with a little more blue if I want to bring some blue in that area, because there's some blue that seems to be reflecting in her eyes. Teeth never look good bright white, but they do look better white than yellow. So you're supposed to be laughing at that one, but it's hard to hear anybody say anything, right? On Zoom. Claudia, you're going to laugh for me. You're going to be my audience that has some repartee with me. Okay. So do you see how that white just left? And I'm going to bring it back again. So I'm going to keep working with this. And it's going to take a little while. But I certainly I have enough time to get to all the whites here because it's fairly wet. It will dry more here than down here because there's a little tilt on this. So that means I want to make sure that I'm getting my whites out up in this section before it dries. I might go through paper towels very quickly. Have any of you ever in watercolor kept a paper towel till it was so wet that you didn't understand why it wasn't working, but you just held on to it anyway?
Yes.
And you're like, why is this not working? So I say, change your towels. Okay.
Meanwhile, Julie, you're continuing to refer to the photograph itself.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
The photograph's in front of me.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. I'm also referring to my study, the black and white study, because I'm definitely altering a little bit of the way I'm working with the light here from the actual photograph.
We have a request that maybe you could just show us for a minute the black and white study.
Sure.
Just superimpose it.
Can you see that okay?
Yes. Uh-huh.
So do you see how I'm really emphasizing? I mean, this side is emphasized,
Uh-huh.
but I'm also getting a lot more darks on the eyes in certain places, not like in the photograph where it's everywhere. I'm making her hair lighter here than it really is in the photograph. I'm going to be emphasizing the darks in here on her hair. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking at. She's got a nice little light spot in her lip there and a lot of bright light coming down here in the photograph.
And just hitting the paper with that's a sort of a dryer brush.
Yeah, see how I keep tapping?
Yes.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Just picks up all that excess color and brings the paper almost back to a whiter
Right.
shade.
And there will be certain paints that will not come up as easily. So don't use green
Mhm,
on a face thinking you're going to get it up, like a bamboo green or something.
mhm.
That will not come up. And certain blues may not, but overall everything that I'm using is liftable.
So kind of the more earthy colors, the yellows, the redder colors, those kinds of things are liftable.
Yes, and also some sedimentary color like cerulean blue is
Uh-huh.
fairly liftable. Any last little areas, maybe just a touch in here, maybe just for fun, a touch in the hair or back here, just a little bit of light back there. And I'm a little late for up here. You see how that's resisting right there? Because I waited a little while. So I'm just going to blot that out a little bit. Yeah, I think I've got a nice feeling now for where I want my lights, just a little bit more in here. But I think this is feeling about where I want it. And you can see that because it keeps drying, at some point, I won't be able to do much at all. And I should stop because I don't want to get a lot of marks.
Mhm.
Okay, good enough. So I'm going to blow dry this, which will take me just about 2 or 3 minutes. So I had a little problem with the tape, and I had to put new tape on there. Um, I tried out a new tape, and I have to use black tape for Zoom because um, otherwise the camera goes crazy. So I'm just going to soften that little area out. It had leaked under the tape. So that's fine. That'll be easy to work with later. Can you still hear me okay?
We can.
Okay.
Julie,
Yeah.
I don't know how big your table is that you're working on, but if
Yes.
there's a way of moving your palette just a little to the left,
Uh-huh. Sure.
and the image
Okay. Sure.
a little more central,
How's
that,
that?
that might be good. Uh-huh.
Does
Yeah.
that work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
Perfect.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So now I'm going to do some shadow shapes. And basically, shadows just show this is the second step where you have blurry areas or harder edges, like that's a harder edge up here. Okay. So I'm going to, go right on the dry paper with the harder edges and soften with a flat brush. And I'll use a little larger flat brush here to do some of the softening, or I will end up using my stiffer brush. But I'm going to go with a little bit of a smaller brush, my size 6, to show you how these shadow shapes work. I've got a few things mixed here. Burnt sienna with a little bit of ultramarine blue mixed in it. And I also have all of these colors from before, the red, the gold, and the blue. And I'm keeping them fairly thin mixtures, like on the edge of a thin dot mixture, and I'll show you what that is. So a dot mixture would have two values in it. You see the lighter and the darker gold, and when I push down, you see a dot that's a little darker. That means it's just a little bit thicker than a puddle mixture. That's a thin dot. Is that clear enough, do you think, Claudia, to see that?
We can't see things on the far left, unfortunately, but
So you couldn't see what I was mixing?
not exactly. I wasn't sure where you were going with that, so yeah.
Can you see my brush right now?
No,
It has to be more like this?
more to pull it to your right.
The other way, the other
The
way.
other way. Yeah.
Okay, because I moved the picture to the left because you said you couldn't see it very well. So
Yeah.
now is this,
This is better. Yeah. A little bit farther. Move it a little more. Yeah. Mhm.
can you still see the picture though?
Oh,
Well
yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Okay, so I was showing the dot mixture. There's the dot right there,
Uh huh.
the lighter and the darker. You see?
Uh huh.
Yeah, just so you can see how that works. And you can still see this one here, even though the painting's nearby,
Yes,
I hope.
yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And again, dot mixture, you see two values in the mixture, a darker and a lighter. And you push to get the white and then get a little dot. So this is what I'm using along with this burnt sienna, ultramarine blue dot mixture. This is burnt sienna here. And get just a little bit more. Okay, and I am going to start working with some shadow shapes. So as I come in and I'm looking at, where these darks are coming in here, I'm looking at where those hard edges are, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to bring this down into this area, but I'm going to turn this a little bit so that I have more control. And if I keep it double coated, meaning, I haven't just put one coat of brown and then I drop other colors in. I can put gold, I can put a little blue, I can put a little pink. I can play with these colors a little bit if I want to. And then bring a little bit of water to this and start to blend it out. That's a little bit on the pink side, so let's get a little bit more brown on there. And I can, create some lines here for some wrinkles if I like. Just bring that right in. Okay, bring this up. I'm working fairly quickly. I would, when you're doing this, do not work on more than one little area at a time. It's really not a good idea to go over here as well. And then I'm going to take my flat brush that's a little stiffer and tap it on my towel with a little water on it and come in here and just soften this out from the outside to the in. Outside where it's dry, along that edge. And here, going from here and up. And by the same token, I can also, I can darken this as I go a little bit. I can bring a little shadow under the upper eyelid. So I'm just showing you how, if you think in terms of some shadow tone in the beginning, it'll make it easier to work with the rest of the portrait. So you're establishing this first. You don't have to. This is just one approach, but it does work nicely. Just bringing this in a little bit. Now I went a little bit over the line there, so I'm going to use my towel and push it back. And I went over the line because it was an awkward angle. So I'm going to play with this from this angle a little bit. And get a little darker. Even still, this needs to be just a little bit thicker. I'm going to go over here and make a little thicker mixture with the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna. See if I can get that a little bit darker in there. Okay. And I'll come and just do a few more darker areas.
Julie, we have a question from the group to ask Julie if she's worked in oils in the past.
I have.
And I know
Yes.
that you do, yeah. And would you approach them in somewhat the same way in doing a portrait?
Not really.
No. Okay.
It's very different. Oil goes from dark to light. Watercolor goes from light to dark. Very different approach. I mean, I wouldn't say that you can't think this way, I'm not saying you can't actually use with oil this idea of the shadows, but overall, you would build the shadows probably before you would build the lights. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm. Yes.
It's just a different order, that's all.
Uh-huh.
Soften. Now she looks like she's got some strange glasses on right now. But everything's going to be blended into each other eventually. And all I'm doing right now is just showing you the general areas where I'm thinking about shadow tone. So with the nose, definitely want to think of this whole area on the lower section, a lot of that being in shadow. Trying to find ways to blend one area into another. Staying in the same area, keeping things wet, adding some other color perhaps. So there's a little variety there. And mind you, I'm going very quickly today because of the amount of time I have, right? So when I'm on my own, I'm going to be really taking a little more time to get all those real subtle things. But, as a demo, I really want you to just see the general way that this works. Coming from the drier area to the wet. Now, if I don't clean that brush well enough, I'm going to get brown up here. You see? I don't want that. And everything doesn't have to be done all in one time frame. Like you can come back, you can say, oh, I think I'd like a little more here, a little more there. So if I miss something on this area, I can notice it later. As we know with all painting, it's that way. You don't have to do everything in one area at once. I use these little things around my brushes because I hurt my hands playing guitar many years ago. And some people, they really hurt, gripping their brushes too tight. This is just felt and a little bit of tape. Okay, so I'm going to go with the small brush again, and this time a little more with the red right in here, and again, some burnt sienna. Just building this up a little bit. And softening. Okay, the lips, the shadow on the lips. Well, you can see here that the upper lip is almost all in shadow. So I'm just going to fill that with a lot of shadow tone. Or it could even be the lipstick color, but basically, I don't think I'm going to go quite as red as she is, but definitely in the photograph. But I do want to create that sense of the dark there. And on the bottom lip, it's more in this area. There's a lot of soft edges on the bottom lip. So I'm just going to use my clean brush here and clean it again, tap on the towel a few times, and come from above to create that soft feeling. There's a little shadow in here as well, and in here, so I can just get a little bit feeling of that dark inside there. This whole area has a lot of shadow in it. But I'm thinking more about the specific areas that are a little darker than the rest of the shadows. So like in here, It's a little bit darker in here. And maybe there's a touch of blue in there, which would be nice. Don't want too much pink, but a little bit is nice in there. And I don't want the chin to be by itself, like separate from the neck. So I tend to go right from the chin into the neck, even if I soften out a little bit. Softening here. And she'll be mad at me if I give her too many hard edge lines. She'll look too old. So I'm going to soften a little bit. Now, one could say, well, if I'm softening so much, why don't I just wet the whole face and do this? But, the thing is, it's really nice to decide, where are these hard edges? Where are these soft edges? There's ways to, really get a little more of those details in. So here, I might want to keep a little harder edge. Well, that looked like it got a little wet there. So just a touch of a harder edge on this little shape. Keeping my mixtures quite thin here. A little bit of the reddish tone. I went a little too far here, so I'm going to push with my stiff brush. See if I can get a little bit of that up, a little bit, and soften that out. Now there's a lot more shadow tone up here, but I think what I'm going to do is just move on now to filling in the eyes, because I want to make sure that, I'm getting most of this finished tonight. And I'm not sure how long I have, but I'll do the best I can here. So I've got a nice brown here with a little bit of ultramarine blue. Going to make a deep brown. And it's a dot mixture. And this dot mixture is going to be even thicker. So watch how little water I'm using in this mixture. This is like a thick dot, the thickest dot mixture, almost with, like, see all the dashes and lines in it, but you can still get a dot when I go like this. All right. So I want to show you how, when I make an eye, I am going to start actually with water. This is the traditional approach, is to start with some water in the iris, not the pupil, but the iris. And I'm going to drop in the brown tone here. Now her eyes are fairly dark. So I'm going to go, I actually didn't even necessarily need to put water in, but if you have a light eye, very light blues, light greens and such, you want to be putting water first, because you'd like to keep that light look and have things blend around. So now I'm going to get a little bit darker here. And I'm going up to the pupil, not going to fill the pupil in yet. I think the magic of watercolor, I'm going to bring this over here for just to connect the eye. The magic of watercolor to me is the eyes, especially in portraiture, because they look so lifelike often if you don't make them stiff. So I'm going to make that very, very thick mixture for the pupil and put it in the middle here, leaving a little bit of highlight there. And I'm going to lift a little bit out right here and drop in just a touch of thicker quinacridone gold. Still a dot mixture, but not as thin as that first mixture. Just a little bit of that in there. And you can start to see the way the pupil is blending right into the eye there. I'm going to lift out a little bit right here and get a little thicker blue. There's a not so thick that it has no transparency, but I'd like to get a little bit of a sense of the bluish tone in here because there's some beautiful light coming into her eye right there. And I'm going to take a little bit of that blue and bring it into the sclera and let that blend a little bit right into the iris. It's time for a new paper towel. I'm going to take that dark tone that I just used on the pupil, and I'm going to bring it around the edge of her iris a little bit, just to accentuate it. And I had already put that shadow in, so I'm just putting a little bit more, bringing a little bit of shadow here and a little dark in here. I think I'll go even darker right in that corner. Let that stand out. And I'm going to start with a little bit of an eyelash coming right up with a small brush right into that area. It's still wet underneath that part. I'm going to just soften whatever, I'd say quin gold and a little burnt sienna. I'm going to bring a little bit into this lid here. Part of the thing that's really important for me with eyes is to leave a little bit up to the imagination, not to try to get it just right, but let the wateriness of the watercolor do its thing so that you get the life in the eye. And a little bit of pink right in here to create the feeling of the sclera. I'm sorry, the tear duct, and a little brown back into that so it's not too bright. A little gold, just playing with that a little bit. And you know something, Claudia, if you want me to skip to work on something else, like I don't have to do both eyes, if
Mhm.
you want me to see hair, I mean, I just don't know how much time we have. So,
Well, I mean, we probably have maybe 5 or 10 more minutes. Usually we keep it, to an hour or just ever so slightly more, and we're
okay,
kind of there already. So,
okay. Well,
but I can see how it's really starting to come together.
yeah.
And
Well, I think,
you've totally nailed the lips.
oh, thank you. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to come in with the red on the nostrils then, because I like red to be coming through the nostrils,
Hmm.
and then a little bit of the brownish tone here. Um, and blend that just a little bit into this area so that the nostril doesn't look like it's too dark. Okay, so I think what I'll do is just a little bit of the hair. So I don't have much time here.
Uh-huh. That would be
And
good to see how you approach that.
mm-hmm, okay. I am going to actually wet the forehead and wet up to the eyebrows a little bit with a little bit of drying and wet the hair and even into the background a little bit. I won't wet the whole background, but I want to just at least give you something. I
Mhm.
mean, show you that I don't want the hair to look like it's a helmet. on the portrait. I made some dark tone here with dark green, dark red, and dark blue. So any dark green, dark red, and blue, but I used alizarin crimson, bamboo green, and ultramarine blue. So as I come in with the hair here and start to develop that, I'm just going to work this in, and basically I'm going to take that little bit of brownish tone as well and move it into here. I got a little green. I wet this, so I'm going to move this area into some shadow tone here. Because if you don't consider the shadows on the forehead along with the hair, then it does look like a person's wearing a helmet.
Mm.
So you see already how as that's going on, and now I can put the hair on, and it feels like it's part of something else, not just lying on there in a strange way. Now this is a flat brush. This is not going to get me terribly far in terms of, you know, getting this area not to bleed out. So I'm taking that flat. This is that oil brush, right? You've seen me use that a lot to really play with softening edges. It's super, super helpful for control. Now I have this started here, and I can come back in and get a little more shadow, right near the hairline, and then come in with even darker paint for the hair. But I want to start with establishing this shadow. And then I'm going to take my big round brush and I'm going to make a little bit stronger paint. You can really see me building this up. Red, blue, and green. And I can even add a little burnt sienna if I want to. Looks like the burnt sienna is not getting on the brush. There we go. That's a thicker dot. It's almost a thickest dot mixture. So that's a good dot right there. And I can come in while this is still wet. Now you notice that at some point I may want to, show hair strands, right? Not just the dark. And she's got very dark hair. So what I'd like to do is get the color on the brush, tap a lot of it off, open or splay the brush a little bit. And where it's drier, I will naturally get some textural quality and lines. But if her hair was not quite so dark, or it's going to dry a little bit lighter too, you can do the same idea that I just did where I dry the brush with, put color on it and then dry it and then come back over. So like for instance, right here where it's still a little bit wet, if I get thick enough with my paint, then I'll be able to get some more texture in there. So for instance, if I tap with a very thick paint on my brush, and this is still a little barely wet, you can start to see some of the strokes of the hair that blend into this.
Is this blacker color, Julie, a color that you could pick up with a dryer brush if you wanted to highlight areas?
I don't know quite how you mean.
The way you picked up color on the cheeks, for instance.
Uh-huh. Oh,
If
yes, yes, I can pick up to get highlight for sure.
you
And I
can,
was
but
just about to show you that.
uh-huh.
So yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'll take this flat brush now. This is a great one for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And come in and lift. You see?
Mm-hmm.
You can lift, create the feeling of the lines of hair. You know, I don't see a lot on the photo here, but if I want to just create a little bit, you know, can come back in, even kind of use that flat on its side to get a little bit of the feeling of the, little edge of the hair there coming out. So you can use the side, you can use part of the brush. Okay,
It's your artistic license.
exactly. This is making a mark right here, right? But if I take this brush right here and I come in with a little darker tone, I can start to get some of the eyebrow in here. And some of this is wet, so this can blend in. And up here we have also some wet, it's getting a little dry now. But it's nice to work wet into wet a little bit, just to get the variety of values. And you can do the same. You can lift out wherever you want to create a little more interest. And if a person has white in their eyebrow, you can lift out from black. So you can really play with that. So I'm going to finish this little section and then we'll call it a day because I don't want to keep you. But, and if you have questions, I wish I could have finished, but
I think that people can unmute themselves now if you'd like. Some of you may have questions you want to ask directly to Julie. And please feel free to do that.
So Julie, on the right cheek, would you put a darker color eventually, or you leave it like that?
no, I'm not done. So basically the steps are start out with that first step, dry well, put in the shadow shapes, do the features is step 3. Step 4 is the hair. And back, you can do that with the background on the forehead, right? And step 5, I could wet this whole thing here and come back in with another wash to bring in the color of the depth of the neck, the area of the cheek, you know.
If it was completely dry, Julie, could you go over the entire painting with a clear, I mean, a water wash?
I could.
You could, and it wouldn't um, disturb the painting of the eye, for instance?
I would not go, that's the one place that I would not go into.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, even the black hair, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. But
right,
even
right.
if it bled a little bit, I can always lift up where it's bled.
Uh-huh.
So even a little bleeding doesn't bother me as long as I can lift it out. But mostly the only things that would bleed would be something super dark and very minimally.
Uh-huh.
Otherwise, everything is going to just stay exactly as it is if it was blow dried really well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The other thing I just want to say is that because I lost my little highlight in the eye,
Mm-hmm.
I can do a little surgery.
Ah,
You see? Just getting a little sparkle of light in there really can help. Just bring more life to the person. Well, I've demonstrated the 5 different I haven't done the 5th one. I mean, if you wanted me to, I could just wet this and just drop in color, and at least you'd see a touch of the 5th area,
mhm.
if you like.
Well, I think we're probably going to bring our meeting to a close tonight, just because
Okay.
that's our tradition.
Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight and being part of this. I hope that I've helped you to see at least the steps that you take with a portrait in watercolor.
Mhm.
And I'm going to be teaching more about drawing the portrait as well as painting the portrait on January 13. It will be a 2-hour demonstration, so I'll have plenty of time to finish. And I invite you to come to that if you have an interest.
Your website is
The
Julie Cohn.
website's there, juliecohnartinstruction.com,
Yes. I
as
think-
well as juliecohnfineart.com.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie.
You're welcome.
That was really great. Yeah, we had a couple of
Great.
people leave early, but they thanked you for a great presentation.
Oh,
So,
I'm really glad you enjoyed
yeah.
it.
So thank you
Great,
so much.
great.